I'm Anne-Louise from Minerva, and I'm here today to sew along with you this historical and exceptional McCall's 8077. This 1890s inspired outfit is great for those who are looking to start their historical sewing journey, as it combines modern sewing methods with Victorian shape and practices. This pattern is made up of two garments. The simplest of the pair is a full and long circle skirt with a placket and hook and bar fastenings, so no zips to worry about. Also, the skirt is super easy to add pockets to, but more about that later. Then the more complicated part is a fully lined jacket with contrast detailing, high collar and ruffles. The jacket features some very flattering princess seams and poof sleeves. We will also be dusting off the buttonhole attachment for the sewing machine and giving some buttonholes a go. The pattern suggests velvet and velveteen for the jacket and gabardine, wool blends and plaids for the skirt in contrast. Of course, all the materials and notions we are using today are available on Minerva right now and will be linked down below and will pop up throughout the video for your ease of shopping. For our skirt and contrast bands, we are using this Minerva Core Range polyester viscose suiting fabric. This fabric has three different colours running through it: a warm ivory natural straw colour, a deep berry red and a midnight black. These three colours make a warm and inviting colour scheme that pairs beautifully with the smoothness of the fabric. For the jacket, we have another Minerva Core Range fabric. This rich and luxuriant red velvet is going to bring out that red woven through our skirt fabric. Velvet is such a fun fabric to work with and one of my personal favourites. This cotton velvet has no stretch and a rich pile, which makes the colour charismatic. Although some of the stretch velvets can slip and slide all over the place, this super stable pure cotton velvet is not only easy peasy to work with, it's something a seamstress would also be using in the 1890s. We will also need a sew-in interfacing to give us some extra structure. For our lining and facing pieces, we have a Minerva Core Range cotton fabric. This smooth but sturdy fabric is going to help support all the work we put into the jacket. For our notions, we will need our beautiful black and gold buttons, our hook and bars, matching threads for both the jacket and the skirt, and our wonderfully woven Minerva label, and of course, some very funky shoulder pads. First things first, we have to double check through our pattern instructions for any hints and tips on how we sew our lovely outfit. We will be using a 1.5cm seam allowance throughout and back stitching the beginning and ends of our stitch lines. Our first job is going to be to flatline our skirt waistband. This is done by laying our sew-in interfacing on the wrong side of the waistband and basting it into place. Now that is complete, we can do a bit of customization. I'm going to pop in some very essential pockets into the side seam of my skirt. For this pattern, as the side seams aren't on the straight of grain, I recommend a pocket that attaches at the waistband to give it a bit of extra security, and to stop that seam stretching out of place too much. So with that in mind, I am lining up my pockets right sides together on my side seams and stitching it into place, leaving a 1.5cm gap at the bottom to carry on that side seam. Now all four pockets are sewn into the related skirt sides, we press the pockets out from the skirt and sew them right sides together. Now to get in place that side seam, we keep the pocket and seam allowance free, and we're going to sew the side seam right sides together. We sew about 1.5 inches down from the waist of the skirt, keeping as close as we can to that pocket stitch line. Then we sew 2 inches up from the bottom of the pocket down to the hem of our skirt. This leaves a handy hand-shaped gap in our pockets and a lovely side seam. You may be thinking, pockets in an 1890s style skirt? I don't have pockets in my modern skirt. There are no way our skirt-wearing friends from the 1890s had them and I don't. Well, let me read you my new favourite magazine excerpt. This 1898 issue of Good Health reads as, "Plenty of pockets is an absolute necessity. One pocket in the skirt, if it is put where one is not obliged to sit on it, and 4 or 5 in the coat, give a woman a feeling of relief and independence in delightful contrast with the helplessness induced by the knowledge that she has no natural place to put her handkerchief, her purse, her watch, her knife, or any other accompaniment of a busy woman's outfit." So there are 2 things we can learn from this. There was an abundance of pockets in skirts and jackets, and women of the day also carried knives. Once our side seams are sewn, the seam allowance pressed open, and the pockets pressed towards the front, we can start work on our placket at the back of our skirt. Our first job is going to be to reinforce the inner corner of the left back skirt piece. Once that section is reinforced, we sew our back section together, from the bottom of the placket to the bottom of our skirt, with right sides together. Once that seam is then pressed open, we can either zigzag stitch or overlock the left back opening placket section. We then turn that piece inside the skirt, pressing along the fold line to create the back placket piece. This is then hand sewn down. The 1890s is such a fantastic looking era and good fashion time to start on if you want to get into historical sewing. You are between the bustles and complicatedness of the 1880s and the unusual silhouette of the 1900s romantic Titanic era that needs a rather long corset. For this era, all you need is this pattern and a can-do attitude. Of course, you can add and take away as many historical elements as you like. For example, I'm adding some pleats to the back of the skirt to make it more of a walking skirt, which were extremely common in that era. They are like a toned down bustle skirt with less aggressive ribbons and ruffles. A corset can be worn underneath this, however, just to make sure to double check your corseted measurements. You could also add some boning to the front of your jacket to smooth out that front, which was a favourable look in the 1890s. Much like a mullet, they were business up front and party in the back. The look given by the pattern is reflected in these fashion plates of the day, where we can see the similar elements, the poof sleeves, the long jacket, the high collar and full skirt. On the right side of the placket, we are folding once, like we have done on the left side, then folding again, so that placket side is in line with our back seam. That too is pressed and hand sewn in place. Now we have a functioning placket, we can pop on our waistband. Our first job is going to be on the unnotched long edge of the waistband, pressing under 1.5 centimeters of fabric to the wrong side of the waistband, and then trimming that folded edge to 1 centimeter. Once that is complete, we attach the notched long side right sides together with our skirt. If you are like me and added in a cheeky extra panel to add some butt ruffles, as my friends call them, to the back of your skirt, pleat the excess waist allowance into the back of the waistband. Once the waistband and skirt are sewn together, with right sides together, we fold the waistband along the fold line and press in place. We then stitch the very ends of the waistband and trim and clip the corners of the seam allowance. Then, once the waistband is pressed the right way out, we can very peacefully slip stitch the original unnotched edge of our waistband to the skirt. Now all we have to do is hem our skirt, and to see how to sew on our hook and bars, stay tuned to the end of the video to see how we attach all our fastenings. When sewing with velvet, we need to be aware of how we work with it so as not to crush the fibres. When ironing, always use some cloth between the iron and the pile side of the velvet. If ironing with piles side down, lay a piece of velvet on your ironing board. This will help keep the fluffy texture. Now we can start to play with our very pretty jacket. This may be a bit daunting, but we are going to go step by step and have a wonderful garment in no time. Our first job is just some very simple layering. We are going to flatline jacket pieces 2, 4, 5 and 6. With wrong sides together, we are going to baste around the edges of our lining and fashion fabric pieces. Once those jacket pieces are underlined, we can apply our interfacing to the inside of our front jacket piece. We're going to baste stitch the jacket front and interfacing along the outside raw edge. Once that is complete, we turn the facing to the inside along the fold line, and while we are folding we tuck the raw edge of the facing in by 1 cm to create our well finished facing piece. We slip stitch that self-made facing piece to the underlining, which makes an invisible stitch to the outside. Now we can start to add our rather fancy trim. We essentially make some bias binding. We start by cutting the front trim piece in half and then fold down the raw edges to the wrong side by 1/4 inch along each long side of the trims. Once our bias binding trim is made, we can start securing it, which is where our placement lines come in very useful. We lay the trim along the top of our placement line, then either pin or baste into place. Then stitch down each long side of the trim to properly secure it to our jacket. Now we start to bring our pieces together. First we bring the front and side front pieces right sides together, matching the notches. We repeat this step with our back pieces. Firstly, sewing our centre front pieces together, then our back pieces and side back pieces. We clip these seams where necessary and press them open. We then bring our front and back pieces together, placing them right sides together at the shoulders, stitching in place and then pressing open. Once our shoulders are attached, we start work on the side seams to end up with a very funky looking waistcoat. I just want to take a quick break here at the halfway mark to talk about the wonderful community here at Minerva. We really want to encourage everyone to take up something crafty. At the top right of the post, you will be able to follow Minerva and keep up to date with offers, new releases, general fabric prettiness, and of course tutorials, sew-alongs and top pattern picks. Let us know what you would like to see next. Comment below. We love to hear what you think. If we fancy adding some sleeves to our unfinished waistcoat, we should probably add some more fancy looking trim to them. Using the same technique we used to create and secure the centre front trim, we are going to stitch in our placement line from the pattern piece and then overlay our handmade bias binding like trim over the top. Once that is secured in place, we sew the underarm seam of the sleeve, matching up both sides of the newly added trim, notches and cuff edge. We will also be sewing the seam of our sleeve lining. Then, with wrong sides together, we line the inside of our sleeves and baste in place. While we baste, we are going to add in 2 lines of gathering stitches to our sleeve head between the 2 dots. Before we add in our sleeves and they become a bit more difficult to manoeuvre with the jacket, we are going to finish off the bottom cuff of the sleeve. To do this, we sew right sides together of the sleeve facing piece, which is cut out of our lining fabric. We then press that little facing piece open and press the unnotched edge of the sleeve facing inwards by 1.5 centimeters. Then, with right sides together and matching notches and seams, we sew the bottom of the edge of the cuff. Then, pull facing out with the seam allowance on the facing side of the seam. We do a quick stay stitch around the sleeve facing. This is to prevent any of that facing peeping out the bottom. We then slip stitch the unnotched folded edge into the underlining and give a good press. Repeat this step on the other sleeve. We then can add the sleeves to our jacket with right sides together, matching back and front notches and our underarm side seams. We pull the gathering stitches until they fit snugly in our armholes. I actually had to widen my armholes. With such a dense fabric such as cotton velvet, there is a limit to how much it can be gathered without giving up the will to live. Having one failed attempt in trying the jacket on, I realised that the armholes were a smidge too small, not only for my sleeves, but also my arms. Once everything is gathered snugly together, we stitch our sleeves and bodices together. Although a bit alien to us today, flat lining was the main choice of garment finishing back in the day. My normal instinct is to bag out my jackets and waistcoats, but this picture of a garment from the 1890s shows the insides of a bodice. There are some things I find really interesting about the inside of the garments. The first is the huge amount of work, structure and time that went into making this. And secondly, it shows the flat lining technique along with the extra bones added into the bodice to create that smooth silhouette that was so popular. This is our progress so far. Isn't she dramatic? I don't know who's solving crimes in Victorian London, but they're definitely wearing this jacket. Now we can start work on our slightly more complicated Mandarin style collar. Our first job is going to be assembling all our elements. We apply the sew-in interfacing to the wrong side of our collar piece in the same method that we used for our jacket facing pieces and our waistband of our skirt. We also baste our collar ruffle wrong sides together all along the raw edge and then lightly iron. We then add 2 lines of gathering stitches along that raw edge so we can add it to one of our collar sections. We add the ruffle piece to the uninterfaced of our collar sections, matching the top raw edges and gathering the ruffle to fit the collar. This is then basted in place. Before we bring our ruffle collar sandwich together, we need to press under 1 centimeter of our long unnotched edge of the neck facing and pin it with wrong sides together of the neck facing to the long right side of the piece of the collar without ruffles. This will now be your collar facing piece. We then slip stitch that pressed under section of the collar facing to the collar piece. Fold under the raw edge by 1.5 centimeters and then trim that new folded under edge to 1 centimeter. Then we can bring two halves together, sewing along the top edge of the collar, creating a secure collar ruffle sandwich. Also, a collar ruffle sandwich is totally what I would call my sewing pattern company if I had one. We then trim the collar seam allowance, turn our collar right way out and press. We then stand back and admire our handiwork. We are on the home straight. We now pin our collar right sides together to our jacket, clipping the jacket neckline where necessary. That is then stitched in place and the collar facing is slip stitched to our jacket lining. To finish the bottom of our jacket, we use the same method that we used on the sleeves, sewing the hem facing right sides together, pressing the seam open and pressing under 1.5 centimeters, and then trimming that pressed under edge to 1 centimeter. Then, with right sides together, we sew the facing and jacket together, matching notches, understitching the seam allowance to the facing and slip stitching that turned over edge to the jacket lining. What velvet and check combos would you like to use for this pattern? What about a black velvet and this incredibly funky yellow check? You can make your very own historical version of the iconic yellow check suit worn by Cher in Clueless. Maybe you fancy something a bit more subtle. What about a burgundy velvet with this calming and warm pink check fabric? Once the bottom of our jacket is neatly pressed, we can make a start on our buttonholes. First things first, we line the buttonhole guide up with the edge of the jacket. We want to place this on the left side of the jacket opening. The left when we look at it, not when we wear it. Using the buttonhole guide to tell us the correct spacing, we measure the buttons to tell us how wide the buttonholes need to be. I find an air erasable pen is really handy for buttonholes. I can doodle as much as I want without any consequences. Once all of our buttonholes are sewn in, we can grab our trusty seam ripper and a pin and open them up. I like to put a pin in at the far end of the buttonhole and then seam rip towards it. This means if the seam ripper goes haywire, I won't damage the buttonhole stitching. Now we have opened up the buttonholes, we can lay the buttonhole side of the jacket onto what is going to be our button side of the jacket. And using our air erasable marker, we mark out our buttons. Sewing buttons and hooks and bars are both easy peasy lemon squeezy and won't make you stress depressed lemon zest. These hook and bars have these holes here to attach them to our fabric, and we just do a simple over and over and in and out till our hook and eyes are nice and secure. The pattern suggests we put 2 hook and bars and some shoulder pads in to finish our jacket, but I decided against these finishes, as the jacket collar felt a little bit too tight for me to be happy with a fastening in there. And I'm pretty broad-shouldered, so I feel I don't really need shoulder pads, which is weird because I have the upper body strength of a shrimp. I feel that knowing how to sew a button on should be a part of school curriculums, but anyway. Firstly, we do a couple of anchoring stitches to properly mark out our button placement and to get a really secure hold on the button. We go through the shank piece of our shank buttons as many times as we like, until the button feels secure. Then wrap the threads around our stitches about 5 times. Then threading it through to the wrong side of the fabric and we tie off the thread. Now we know how to sew our buttons, we sew them on down the front of our jacket and we are done. The outfit is so unique and the materials make it something really special. The cotton velvet brings a luxury and structure to an already fantastic and flattering jacket pattern. The added little extras like the ruffle collar and sleeve and front detailing make it absolutely astounding and something I will most likely be wearing in my day-to-day life, not just for dressing up. The skirt feels elegant and timeless. The weight and drape of the skirt makes me walk taller and with more confidence. Although a little long for my day-to-day life, I can't wait for another excuse to pop on my outfit and go for a ride. Here at Minerva, we love to hear your views. Have you been inspired to dive into historical dressmaking? What fabric would you use for this McCall's pattern? Any questions, comment below and we'd be happy to answer them. And don't forget, Minerva Craft Club members get a 10% discount for 12 months when they sign up. And creating a free account, you'll get a welcome present of a discount coupon. So join us with our lovely community of makers, follow, comment and like. And we'll see you next time.